wish to welcome you to IEA on behalf of our president, who is Dr. Charles Mensah. We called you here today to share with you our views on the Finance Minister's 2019 Supplementary Budget and Mid-Year Economic Review that we all know they presented to Parliament on Monday, July 29. But we do this, we do this on a regular basis. In other words, after every budget, we meet with the press and present to them our comments on the budget. As I said, I'm Dr. Kwachi, I'm Director of Research, and I'll be doing the presentation for the Institute. Now, I'll be using the following outline for my presentations. As you know, the budget covers so many areas, so you can only be selective. You can't discuss everything in the budget. So we have selected these areas to comment on. One is revenue mobilization. We'll also take a look at expenditure. Then the overall budget deficit. Public debt. We'll be discussing public debt. We'll be discussing economic growth and then job creation. And then finally, I'll end up with telling you about whom I think were the losers, the winners in this budget, and then who were also the losers in the budget. That will be my opinion. So let's start with revenue mobilization. Here, the message we want you to carry across is that we are not happy about the fact that the minister introduced more taxes on consumers. We think that he could have been more innovative, in introducing new measures rather than imposing more taxes on consumers. Now, he reported that in the first half year, revenue collection was 22.8 billion Ghana cedis. And this fell short of the target of 27 billion Ghana cedis by 4.2 billion or 15.5%. Now, as you know, we have been missing our revenue targets for a long time. And some people attribute this to the fact that maybe we tend to overestimate the targets. And apparently, when you overestimate your target, then of course, you can also make more room for expenditure because you relate your expenditure to your target in order to achieve your budget deficit. In fact, Ghana's tax to GDP ratio is only about 12 to 13%. After we did the rebasing recently, because the GDP is your denominator, the ratio has dropped to just about 12 to 13%. When you compare with middle income peers, their average is something like about 12-25%. So we are doing just about half of what our middle income peers are doing, which is not an enviable situation at all. In fact, Ghana's tax effort, the low tax effort, is blamed largely on the narrow base, inefficient administration, and low compliance or enforcement. These are the factors, the reasons that we normally use to explain our low tax effort. But the problem actually goes beyond these familiar causes. To compensate for the revenue shortfall in the first half year, the minister announced some tax increases going into the second half year. The energy sector levy, he increased it by 20 pesos per litre for petrol. Now, this will certainly have a cascading effect on the prices of many other goods and services dependent directly or indirectly on petrol. Now, the demand for petrol, well, in economics, we say that it's not completely inelastic, in the sense that, it's not like people will try and conserve, do some kind of conservation or cost-saving, measures. Well, if you were using 2 cars before, maybe when you park one of them, or you do carpooling with friends and so. What the point we are making is that if the minister was expecting to derive, a certain amount of revenue from this tax increase, he may not get it all because people will adopt some cost-saving, measures. Then the communication service tax, we also increase that from 6% to 9%. This will increase the cost of calls, messages, and data. Here also, we expect that customers, especially those at the lower end of the social ladder, the social spectrum, may reduce their use of these services, and therefore the planned revenue increase may be moderated. The minister also mentioned plans to increase efficiency of tax collection at the ports, and then also to enhance tax compliance. But the impact of these measures on revenue is always difficult to quantify. And in the past, such measures have not yielded significant gains. The minister announced the abolition of the luxury vehicle tax, but we couldn't agree with him more. This is a tax that never achieved its purpose, and therefore we welcome the fact that he abolished it. And now he estimated for the year as a whole that he will raise revenue of 58.900 billion. Now I add all the digits because the original estimate for the year was, the new estimate after the tax measures and all that is 58.900. And the original target when he presented the budget last year was 58.905. So you can see that the minister is saying that he's going to be able to achieve the target that he set last year after he has introduced these new measures. Now, given that in the first half year the revenue collection was 22.8 billion, the collection for the second half year will have to be 36.1, or 58.3% more than the figure, how much he collected in the first half year, if he is to be able to achieve the target that he has set of 58.9 billion for the year as a whole. Now, we recognize that tax increases will bring in additional revenue, but to say that they will help to increase revenue by 58.3% would appear to us to be a little bit ambitious. The risk is that, when you estimate, revenue, so optimistically, you also create a room to raise expenditure expectations. This is what we experience, every time. And eventually, if you don't attain your revenues, but meanwhile you have raised your expenditure expectations and you throw the budget out of gear. This is what we experience, every time. Now, it has to be said that the decision to increase some taxes, we think, is unfortunate, given the additional burden the increases will impose on already overburdened taxpayers. Now, rather than increasing the taxes, we were expecting the minister to introduce new initiatives, to raise revenue. Now, we recognize attempts to broaden the tax net through digitization, and we expect that program to be intensified. Now, the informal sector of the economy comprises numerous activities, and they remain virtually, beyond the tax net. Now, it is the case that individual incomes are small, but when you aggregate the individual incomes in the informal sector, but the GSS, Ghana Statistical Service, tells us that the informal sector contributes 30% of the GDP. So, even though the incomes there are small, they contribute 30% of GDP. Therefore, it makes sense to try and bring them into the tax net. But we turn to tax exemptions, which are reported to amount to about 5 billion Ghana cedis annually, the tax exemptions. The President lamented about this problem in his 2019 State of the Nation address. We know that government has submitted a tax exemption bill to Parliament aimed at reducing the exemptions. And we were surprised that the minister kept silent, about the bill. The question is the silence due to lack of political will to pass the bill? And is it because the beneficiaries of the exemptions include parliamentarians themselves and other so-called government-privileged persons? Now, beyond the exemptions, we lose taxes through trade misinvoicing, which is estimated conservatively to be around $2 to $3 billion annually. We lose revenue through transfer pricing by multinationals, and they use the scheme to reduce their corporate tax payments. Further, huge losses occur through other illicit financial flows. Above all, there is rampant tax fraud and corruption perpetrated by taxpayers in collusion with revenue officials. It is not surprising that the minister reported that a large shortfall occurred in customs taxes. This is due to the fraud and the corruption that goes on. Further, we collect only a fraction of the potential tax from the sprawling real estate properties, many of which are owned by political privileged persons. And what is being done about all these revenue losses? In fact, conservative estimates put the total revenue losses through these channels around 7 to 8% of GDP. You remember I mentioned that presently we collect just about 12 to 13% of our GDP, but we are losing 7 to 8% through these leakages. Now, if these leakages were to be plugged, we could add the losses to what we are collecting and raise our tax effort to something like 20-21%, which will be a little bit closer to what our peers, middle-income peers, are doing. But beyond these revenue losses that need to be prevented, the minister could have considered other tax initiatives. First, he could have considered taxing bank profits to help pay for the cost of the banking sector cleanup. Given the interconnectedness within the banking sector, with its potential contagion effects, a case could be made for all banks to contribute to the resolution of the crisis. I would have imposed a banking sector stabilization levy of, say, 10% on the profits of all banks. After all, the banks are making huge profits. We hear them declare, huge profits, a chunk of which comes from net interest income. Reflecting the unjustifiably wide spreads that they maintain between lending and deposit rates. That said, I know that the banks currently pay 5% national fiscal stabilization levy. Now, that is a tax that we feel is difficult to justify, since the destabilization of the economy through fiscal indiscipline that was used to justify the tax could not in any way be blamed on banks. Second, the mining sector is the most booming sector in the economy. This means that more income is accruing to the sector than any other. And it follows that that is where the minister should be looking for more revenue. I would have introduced a 5% tax on the profits of the mining sector to help raise more revenue. Third, the telcos, the telecom companies, are also making super profits, partly as a result of lax regulation of their charges. I would have imposed a tax of 5% on their profits, while strictly regulating their charges so that they do not pass the extra tax on to their customers. In fact, to us, such a tax is more justifiable than the increase in the CST, which is to be borne by customers. Now, the point we are making here is that the minister could have explored new initiatives to mobilize revenue, rather than resorting to a convenient but counterproductive approach of increasing taxes, imposing it on consumers. But beyond all these potential revenue initiatives that we have mentioned, there is a vast unexplored potential to raise resources to support the budget and Ghana's development and position the country beyond aid. This potential lies in harnessing our vast natural resource wealth. We have credible evidence that Ghana has natural resource reserves in the form of gold, oil, gas, bauxite, manganese, iron ore, that is worth over 12 trillion US dollars. Yes, 12 trillion US dollars. Therefore, should we not blame ourselves for being poor above ground and being so much indebted to have been once tagged a hippie country? Some people argue that we cannot trust our leaders to manage the resources efficiently, devoid of corruption. As such, they argue that we'll be better off keeping the resources underground. Now, we understand that the natural resources are depletable, and we need to preserve some for the benefit of future generations. We will, however, suggest that we can take precautionary measures to prevent potential abuses of the resources that we extract today. An important way to safeguard the extracted reserves is to deposit the proceeds in a sovereign wealth fund and place the reserves, the fund, under the control of the central bank to be used as needed. Now, it is also sometimes suggested that we do not have the capacity to absorb the resources efficiently. Now, to this argument, our response will be that We will have to extract the resources at a pace certainly commensurate with our own capacities. However, it has to be pointed out that it does not always require only domestic capacities to exploit natural resources. Capacities that are lacking locally can be sourced or contracted internationally. In the circumstance, it will be helpful to include local content in the contracts we sign with foreign companies so that the requisite capacities can be transferred to Ghanaians. The fact is that we have been exploiting some of our natural resource well. However, sadly, we have been doing so under colonial contracts that cede disproportionately high portions of the resources to foreign investors. We fail to follow international best practice based on service contracts which pay investors for their services but do not cede the fiscal resource to them. We are calling for extraction of our vast natural resource wealth buried underground in a measured, transparent, efficient, and corruption-free manner to scale up our reserves for building the economy for the benefit of current and future generations. We can also use our natural resource reserves for another important purpose, that is, in propping up the embattled cedi. Bank of Ghana has never had reserves in excess of $10 billion US. Therefore, it is not surprising that the bank has not been able to keep the cedi stable for any protracted period of time. Imagine building Bank of Ghana's reserves over a 5-year period to $50 billion US, which is quite feasible given our natural resource wealth endowment. Now, with that size of reserves, Bank of Ghana will be able to keep the cedi stable on a more lasting basis. In fact, no speculator will dare speculate against the currency if it is so strongly backed by reserves. We are in no way suggesting that reserve cover should be the only way to secure the cedi. Ultimately, the strength of the cedi will be determined by the overall strength of the economy. The reserve cover will be one of a toolkit of measures that will guarantee lasting stability of the cedi. The toolkit of measures should ensure that the economy is transformed into a vibrant, resilient, and self-sufficient one. The natural resource wealth can also be an instrument in achieving such economic transformation. Now I move on to the expenditure side of the budget. And here, the message we want to put across is that we shouldn't be treating expenditure as, business as usual. We need to rationalize our expenditure. We cannot justifiably talk about the need to raise revenue without looking at how it will be used. So we go to the expenditure side of the budget that usually receives less attention and scrutiny. In fact, we can collect all the revenue that we possibly can, but if we spend it recklessly, we cannot achieve the intended impact on the economy. Now, the finance minister reported that expenditure in the first half year was 34.2 billion, and this was 92.9% of the target of 36.8 billion. Now, as I mentioned upstairs, revenue was 84.5% of his target, and then here, expenditure is 92.9% of the target. Now, this is a very familiar story in the sense that expenditure almost invariably tends to run ahead of revenue. This, of course, means that we almost invariably experience deficit overruns. which lead to more borrowing and more debt accumulation. For the year as a whole, expenditure is estimated to be 74.6 billion, which will be higher than the original target of 73.4 billion. So again, if you recollect, we mentioned that for the revenue, the minister said, my new estimates will let me achieve my original target. On the other hand, when you go to the expenditure side, his new expenditure estimates will take him beyond the original target. Now, this will imply a higher deficit than originally estimated. Now, it is disappointing that expenditure was not reduced so as to maintain the original deficit target. That said, with the first half year expenditure of 34.2, the annual expenditure estimate of 74.6 implies that the second half year expenditure will have to be 40.4, which is 18% more than the first half year figure. The expenditure estimate may even be conservative, given the usual rush to spend by MDAs when we get into the second half year, just ahead of the next budget. Now, scaling down expenditure in line with revenues is not normally an option because of the high expectations we create by our optimistic revenue projections, along with the lavish political promises. In fact, spending recklessly can be related not only to the expenditure level, but its composition as well. And when we open up expenditure, what we see is a whole Pandora's box. First, obligatory expenditures which go to wages, interest, and statutory funds have escalated to the extent that they exceed total revenue. This implies that other expenditures which go to goods and services and capital have to be funded from borrowing. Now, in practice, the borrowings are used to fund largely the ever-growing goods and services, while capital expenditure has been squeezed, a scenario that is detrimental to long-term growth. The chunk of funds spent on goods and services is going to the expanding public sector, which is absorbing more personnel and logistics. The growing number of ministries and regions, along with several policy initiatives, are exacting an increasing toll on the public purse. Current levels and composition of expenditure are difficult to justify and may not even be sustainable. Unfortunately, instead of curtailing expenditures in line with realistic revenue estimates, we rather overestimate revenues such that we can equally raise expenditures. In the end, we do not realize the estimated revenues, expenditures are protected, and higher deficits occur. But it does not have to be business as usual. A complete rationalization of expenditure is required, even as we enlarge the revenue envelope such that the bigger revenue can be put to optimum use. Collecting more revenue and spending it imprudently would be irresponsible financial management. Specifically, we believe there is room to reduce recurrent expenditure, including relating to remuneration, travel expenses, entertainment expenses, general administrative expenses, etc., and thereby create space for more productive capital expenditure. Now, whilst we are on expenditure, we want to bring up two big expenditure items: the energy sector and the free senior high school policy and highlight possible means of reducing their burden on the budget. Now, the minister mentioned the immense challenge posed by the energy sector debt to public finances. The debt had resulted from accumulation of excess capacity in the sector as a consequence of the signing of several take-or-pay contracts by the previous administration in response to the long-lasting energy crisis. Servicing the contracts has put enormous burden on the budget. It is to help pay for the contracts that the minister increased the energy sector levy. But the question is whether we have explored other options to mitigate the debt payments. First, while current energy demand is far less than installed capacity, the countrywide consumer coverage is said to be about 80%. So why don't we make efforts to expand the coverage so that we can increase demand and also receive revenues therefrom. Second, we can, as been suggested, that we could reduce tariffs in a differentiated manner to try and boost demand for energy, which will generate revenue from higher consumption. Third, if, as we have heard from credible sources, we cannot sell some of our excess energy to our neighbours because of our higher production costs, why don't we sell it to them at their own production costs? We will make losses, but at least we will earn some revenue to partly offset the energy sector costs. Of course, in the medium to long term, the power needs of the economy will grow, including power that will be needed for the envisaged industrialisation and mining projects. Although we recognize that we cannot afford to keep the idle capacity for too long. Of course, the government also has the option to renegotiate some of these contracts. That's another option. Now, coming to Free Senior High School policy, it has to be said that human capital is undoubtedly the most important asset of any nation, which is a critical requirement for economic development. From that standpoint, the Free Senior High School policy can be said to be a justifiable one. It will open access to many students who would otherwise have been left behind due to financial constraints. However, in its current form, the Free Senior High School policy is undoubtedly a very costly enterprise. The number of students involved that is likely to mount with additional future streams will compound the cost. It is also very costly for government to offer a whole range of free things under the policy, including the fees, other academic charges, books, accommodation, food, and uniforms. The mounting Free Senior High School policy costs will put immense burden on the budget and leave limited space to undertake other equally important projects and programs. It will be worthwhile to consider options to reduce the cost to the budget. First, a kind of means testing scheme could be introduced to make financially capable parents pay for their awards. This is an idea that a large cross-section of Ghanaians seem to support, and which might be seriously be considered by government. The way to operationalize such a system can be worked out. Second, a government-parent cost-sharing arrangement could be arranged, whereby government pays for, say, academic fees and charges, books and boarding, while parents pay for feeding and uniforms, or other suitable cost-sharing arrangements. Third, consideration could be given to the idea of, and I know this one will stir up some kind of, the idea of government limiting its support to say 3 students per family. Some people will say that this will be an indirect family planning scheme. But the fact is that it is costly to have an open-ended system whereby government commits to pay for all the children of every family. That will open the floodgates for families to produce as many children as they like, expecting that government will take care of all of them. 4, consideration could be given to building more community-based non-residential schools, such that accommodation, feeding, and commuting costs can be curtailed. If you go to other countries, other jurisdictions, they have this system, community-based schools. So that if you are in the Dansoma, there's a college there, a senior Christian high school, community-based, so that you can send your students there, your wards, and it will be non-residential. That will reduce costs. Finally, it will be helpful to set up an endowment fund to partly fund the free senior high school policy. The fund can be partly funded from oil money. You can use part of the oil money, while additional funding may be solicited from companies and individuals. I'll move on to the budget deficit. The message we have here is that there is a fiscal rule that has been introduced, passed by this government. And we think that that rule must be a red line that should never be crossed. Now, the minister reported that the budget deficit for H1 was 3.3% of GDP, compared with the target of 2.9%. Now, the higher deficit is the result of, we mentioned, expenditure running ahead of revenue. Now, it is recalled that the original annual deficit was 4.2%. When the minister presented the budget last year, he set a target of 4.2% deficit for the year as a whole. Therefore, with the deficit of the first half year being 3.3, achieving the original annual deficit would have required that the deficit for the remainder of the year, the second half year, will be just 0.9%. The minister realized that achieving this would have been very challenging. So what he did was to revise the annual deficit from the original 4.2 to now 4.5. Now, as we have explained above, the minister expects to achieve this through his new revenue measures, which will allow the original annual revenue target to be achieved, along with a little higher level of expenditure. However, as we argued, both the revenue and expenditure estimates are rather optimistic, and their achievement will be challenging. So achieving even his new target of the deficit target of 4.5%, we believe will still be very challenging. Now, it is unfortunate that the deficit target has had to be increased, because the original target of 4.2% was even regarded as a loosening of fiscal policy, because last year the deficit was reported to be 3.9%. So we were going up to 4.2% this year, and now we're going up further to 4.5%. Now, the new deficit of 4.5% will imply even more loosening of policy, which will have implications for things. You must borrow more, you must add more to the debt, and then inflation, exchange rates implications. That said, we know that the new deficit still falls within the fiscal responsibility law ceiling of 5%. Now, the law was passed under this government, and this government has committed to obey it, the ceiling, at all costs. Now, the government must be aware that its credibility to maintain the fiscal discipline after the IMF program is at stake. We want to add our voice to calls for government to adhere strictly to the fiscal rule under the fiscal responsibility law to gain the confidence of investors and the international community. In fact, the fiscal rule should be seen as a red line, never to be crossed. The year 2020 will even be a bigger test, given Ghana's poor fiscal record in election years. Now, the public debt. Here, our message is that we've gotten somewhere, we've gotten to a point as far as our public debt position is concerned. Our message is that we didn't need to be here where we are now if we had been more prudent. Now, the minister reported that Ghana's public debt as of end June stood at 204 billion Ghana cedis. This is 59.2% of GDP. Now, we recall that when Ghana benefited from HIPIC debt relief, our debt to GDP ratio tumbled from over 100% to 26%. This was in 2006. Now, today, we are back up to 59.2% of GDP. Even after we have done 2 GDP rebasings, when we have increased our GDP, the debt to GDP ratio is up to 59.2%. Now, in terms of sustainability, 60% of GDP is usually considered as a rough threshold, for sustainability for lower middle income countries, just like Ghana. So we are at 59.2%, which is quite close to the threshold. Of course, sustainability is something that you look at it over a period of time. It's not just at a point in time. So the 60% threshold, but we know it will be reached sooner than later. Further, the debt to GDP ratio is only one indicator of sustainability. Now you need to get a broader picture by looking at other indicators. Now, even if you look at our debt service ratio, debt service to revenue, presently, our debt service to revenue ratio is about over 40%, which is also above a rough sustainability threshold of about 25 to 30%. In fact, studies by the IMF and other agencies suggest that Ghana faces a high risk of debt distress if we continue along the current fiscal and borrowing path. The question is, how did we get here? After we obtained debt relief under the HIPIC and were able to reduce our debt to GDP ratio to 26%. Now, we got here because we have recorded high budget deficits over all these years that necessitated high levels of borrowing to finance. But we did not need to get here if we had practiced fiscal discipline. The surest way to rein in the debt and ensure long-term debt sustainability is to limit the fiscal deficit, which drives the borrowing. In this connection, the passage of the fiscal responsibility law that limits the fiscal deficit to 5% is an important step towards reining in borrowing and debt accumulation. That the test will be to keep the deficit ceiling, especially in election years. Now, when discussing the debt, a common question that comes up frequently, usually across the political divide, is what the loans that led to the debt have been used for. Now, I want to take this opportunity to contribute to this debate by providing facts that may help shape the public discourse. Now, it may probably sound simplistic, but the fact is that when you borrow, you use it to finance your budget deficit. Now, to put it differently, you collect revenue, it's not enough to fund your expenditure. So you have to borrow to top up your revenue so that you meet your expenditure. Now, expenditure includes your wages, interest, payments, goods and services, transfers that you make to statutory funds, a capital, and then even in paying past loans. This is where all the expenditure goes to. Therefore, practically, it is difficult to be able to separate, try to isolate your borrowing from your revenue and show what it has been used for. But that said, well, because you borrow, you add it to revenue, and you put so in the consolidated fund and use it to fund your expenditures. But of course, we know that foreign borrowings, especially, most of it, they are contracted and they are tied to specific projects. And therefore, it should be easy to isolate that portion and say, we borrowed for these projects and we have used them for these projects. Now, let's take the period from January 2017 to June 2019. This is the period of the current government. Okay. Now, when they took over at the end of 2016, the debt stock was 122 billion at the end of 2016. Now, as of June, and this is equivalent in dollar terms, $29 billion. So when this government took over, at the end of 2016, our debt stock was 122 billion, and it was $29 billion. 122 billion cedis, $29 billion. Now, at the end of June, the debt stock is said to be $204 billion, 204 billion Ghana cedis, and equivalent dollars is $38.5 billion. Now, this means that the increase in the debt stock over the period of this administration up to June is 82 billion Ghana cedis. Now, we have to acknowledge here that it is not all this 82 billion cedis that is borrowing, because it's in cedis, it includes an exchange rate effect. Now, in fact, if no new debt, if this government, they came, when they assumed power, if they've not taken any new debt, they have not borrowed at all, the debt stock that they came to meet of the 122 billion Ghana cedis or $29 billion dollars, if you converted it to June, it will stand at 153.7 billion. Okay? The 122 billion they came to meet, if they had not added on to it, by the end of June, it will stand at 153 billion Ghana cedis. Okay? Now, this implies that the new addition to the debt stock over the period is 204 minus 153. I've taken out the exchange rate effect, and you get 50.3 billion Ghana cedis, or $9.5 billion. So that much, the 50.3 billion Ghana cedis, you can say that is how much this government had added on as new debt if you take out the exchange rate effect. Now, as to what they have used it for, I think the authorities can help us by providing the required data. They can start first by isolating the project tied loans. As I said, when they go to Parliament, for Parliament to approve loans, the external loans, they are tied to projects. So tell us, we use it for these projects. Then we can also isolate some of the big ticket items, like what they have used for the bank bailout. They say it's almost 12 billion Ghana cedis. Free senior high school, energy sector, national health insurance, contractors, granting for food and jobs, one district, one factory, new regions, regional development bills, NAPCO, nursing trainees, teacher trainees. Now, all of these can be quantified. Now, I think they often attempt to try and match loans solely to fiscal assets or infrastructure may be misplaced, because I don't think it is as simple as that. Between these two parties, they'll be asking themselves, what have we used the loans for? Which fiscal assets are out there, infrastructure, which schools, which hospitals? I'm saying that kind of analysis, may be misplaced. Now, any attempt to try and strictly differentiate the use of loans for consumption and capital spending may also be misplaced, because capital in economics is a broader concept. It is not just the fiscal capital or infrastructure, as we call it. Now, how about human capital, which may even be, it may trump fiscal capital in terms of its contribution to development. Now, one government may choose to concentrate on developing fiscal capital. Another may make development of human capital its focus. We can pick and choose as to which is the priority for Ghana's development. Now, why am I going into this? I'm presenting these facts. I'm a technical person. I hear this argument out there, and it's like, the two parties, they're confusing all of us. So I'm getting into this so that will help with the public discourse, try to understand some of these things. Now let me move on quickly to economic growth, which is the final section. The economic growth and job creation. Our message here is that there has been a divide between growth and job creation. In other words, it's like, as a country, we've been experiencing very high rates of growth, but we are not creating enough jobs. So there's this divide which needs to be bridged. So that's our message there. Now, we've been experiencing a very high rate of growth ahead of many of our peers. But the growth is driven largely by extractives, particularly oil and gas. Services has also been doing well, and in fact, it has become the lead contributor to GDP. The core sectors of the economy, agriculture and manufacturing, however, have not been growing as fast. Now, the unbalanced growth that we are experiencing has implications for income distribution and employment. And we need to bridge the gap between growth and employment creation. Now, the benefits of growth in terms of income always accrue to the sectors that are contributing to growth. That's the economics of it. The growth is taking place, those sectors that are contributing to the growth are earning the incomes. One therefore expects incomes in the extractives and services sectors to be growing faster than those of the lagging sectors of the economy, which are the agricultural and manufacturing sectors. Further, the booming sectors of the economy, particularly the extractives, they are highly capital intensive, and therefore they do not generate enough jobs. The relatively more labor intensive agricultural and manufacturing sectors are not generating enough growth because they are also not growing that fast. As a result, the high economic growth that is taking place has been largely non-job growth. Unemployment, particularly among the youth, has therefore remained high and constitutes one of the biggest challenges facing the country. Government remains the biggest employer, but the public sector is already choked with excess, unproductive, and poorly remunerated labor force. The private sector remains weak and has limited capacity to create jobs. While the demand for labor remains constrained, the growing labor force lacks the requisite skills to enable it contribute to rapid expansion of the economy to allow it to create more jobs. Governments have resorted to the use of youth employment schemes to create jobs, but these tend to be only stopgap measures that cannot adequately deal with the unemployment problem. In general, state-sponsored employment schemes can only be palliatives rather than permanent solutions to the unemployment problem. It will take a vibrant private sector to create jobs on the scale necessary to absorb the teeming unemployed youth. The private sector will need public support in creating the enabling environment for it to grow. This will require, among others, easing the regulatory burden, reducing the high rates and multiplicity of taxes, ensuring affordable credit, improving business supporting infrastructure, and ensuring favorable trade policies, stable and affordable energy, and durable macroeconomic stability. The One District, One Factory and Planting for Food and Jobs initiatives, if properly implemented, can create jobs, especially in the rural areas, raise rural incomes, and reduce the rural-urban migration with its attendant socio-economic problems. The implementation of the 1D, 1F and PFJ must be informed by our own experiences as a country, as well as best international practices to optimize their outcomes. Finally, the losers and winners in the budget. Now, on the whole, we think that consumers who have been slapped with tax increases were the losers in the budget review. On the other hand, businesses who were spared any tax increases were the winners. It should have been the other way around. We believe that the minister will be more successful in raising revenue to fund his expenditure needs if he directs his tax increases to the booming and more resourceful businesses rather than to less resourceful and overtaxed consumers. I think it makes sense that the booming sectors of the economy, where the money is where you go for the money, rather than trying to squeeze it out of consumers who are not so resourceful and are already overtaxed. Thank you so much.